Hi, I'm Alicia.
And I'm Robin, and you're listening to Bowel Moments,
the podcast sharing real talk about the realities of IBD. Served on the rocks. This week we talked to Jackie Zimmerman, and Robin had a little bit of a fangirl moment. Jackie is one of the creators of Girls with Guts, and she had an OG blog called Blood, Poop, and Tears, and Robin was a big fan. We talked to her about her ulcerative colitis, her J-pouch surgery, and living with multiple sclerosis and how she coordinates her care. We talked to her about running her own business as somebody who has chronic illnesses and having to shop for health insurance and so many more things. Enjoy. Cheers.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Bowel Moments. This is Robin.
Hey, guys. This is Alicia, and we are so excited to be joined by Jackie Zimmerman. Jackie, welcome to the show.
Hi there. I'm really excited to be here. I have to say, you guys came wildly highly recommended from one of my very good friends, so that speaks volumes.
We won't ask you who it is just in case we don't like them. I'm joking. We love all of our. I think we know who it is as well, so that's awesome. Well, we are so excited to have you on this show because you have just a ton of stories to tell us just based on what we've already talked about. But we're going to start out by asking you, what are you drinking?
Today, I feel like I am drinking the ultimate IBD delicacy in coconut water because I'm dehydrated.
Oh, no. Well, coconut water is a great choice, and it actually tastes good too. So I think that's a good thing. Robin, what about you?
I am living on the edge right now, and I'm drinking a sparkling Paloma, grapefruit and tequila. And I will just say that I don't think that I've had tequila since college for reasons that I shall not name on this show.
So Robin's going to get spicy today.
We'll see what happens. We'll see. Alicia, what are you drinking?
Well, yours sounds really good. Is it a pre-mixed one or is it something you made
It is
yourself?
a pre-mixed one. So, oh my God, I can't drink this. Okay. I have to get blood work done tomorrow. I can't drink this. Dang it.
Oh.
I'm drinking water now.
Well, okay. Maybe you save it for tomorrow after your blood work. Oh, Robin, that's so sad.
I'm so glad I remembered. Because otherwise I would have to cancel my appointment at 6:00 in the morning.
Oh, no. Okay, well, I'm glad you didn't even take a drink of it, so that's good. Okay. Well, you'll have to tell us whether you like it another day. Sad. I am drinking a Marionberry bourbon drink. I know. We'll see how this goes. My husband bought me like these cute little like cordials, like little syrups where you add alcohol and like sparkling water or whatever it is. So this one was supposed to be like bourbon and lemon juice. Okay. And you mix it all together. I didn't have any lemon juice, so I used lemonade. I figured that's the same, right?
Close enough.
Close enough.
I know. I figured it's organic, so therefore it's better. And so, yeah, so that's what I made. And it's in my beautiful glass. So anyway, so cheers, guys.
Cheers.
As the only person drinking.
Cheers. I tried. I'm sorry. I tried.
Okay. I'm glad you remembered. Oh my God. Okay, Jackie, again, we are so delighted to have you on the show. Next question for you is, tell us your IBD story. What brings you into our community?
So many, many moons ago, we'll start at the beginning of this whole chronic illness bit. In 2006, I was finishing up undergrad, and in my final semester of college, I got diagnosed with MS, which is multiple sclerosis. And I was like, at the time, 21, this is the worst thing that could ever possibly happen to me. You know, I was just about to start life, and I just felt like, man, this is a real bummer here. And then 3 years later, I was diagnosed with UC. And the reason why I bring up the other one is because in hindsight, that MS diagnosis at the time was like, ain't no thing. I thought it was the worst thing ever. And then UC came along and was like, hold my beer, because we are really gonna, can I swear? Is this a sweary? Okay. We're really going to fuck stuff up is basically what IBD came in. And I had really been experiencing IBD symptoms for about 10 years prior to diagnosis, but I was mortified about it. So I told no one. I didn't tell my family. I didn't tell my friends. I just had I was a girl in high school who obviously does not poop and cannot talk about it, even if she did. Right. So I made this pact with myself that I would go when I was on my own insurance at some point. I don't, it's a weird thing, but that was like what I decided was going to be we'll wait till then. I don't know. So I start having like a lot of blood in the stool, and it took a friend of mine to be like, you should really see a doctor. And I was like, no, this is fine. This is fine. Just every once in a while, this is totally fine. And she was like, this is not fine. You should really go to a doctor. And so I finally went, and the doctor initially was like, hey, we're going to pump you full of fiber. Even though constipation was one of my major issues in the beginning, he was like, fiber, throw some fiber at it. Well, it didn't work. Shocking. And so he was like, we're going to do a flex sig on you. And me, being a baby patient at the time, was like, sure, great plan. I don't know what that meant. I didn't know what a flex sig was, but I was like, that's what we got to do. And I also didn't know that it meant I was going to be awake for it. So I go in, I'm laying on the table. And you maybe have experienced this, but if you've ever been awake for a scope, there's this moment where you're laying on your side and the TV is in front of you that they're going to scope you on. And they take the wand and they turn towards you, and your little butt in the TV starts getting bigger and bigger and bigger as they get closer to your butt. So then you're like huge ass on the television, and here we go. We're off to the races. So they go, and, I am acutely aware of everything because I'm still just as mortified as I was at 16, at 24. And all I'm thinking is like how mortifying this whole experience is. And also at the time, wildly painful, because what I learned through that was I was in an active flare. And I'm begging them to stop because it's so painful. And I'm like, please stop doing this. And he finally stops and comes over to me, and I'm still laying on the table. And the doctor pats me on the shoulder and says, don't worry, it's just UC. And I was like, all right, that sounds pretty okay, right? Like just UC, but whatever. So we start treatments, and like a lot of people, my first treatment was one of the 5 ASAs. And I am one of those lucky 1%ers who had a heart condition as a result of that. And I had to have a somewhat emergency heart surgery because I had too much fluid built up around my heart. And so they had to do, and we waited too long. Well, we doctors waited too long to address it. So instead of lancing it with a giant needle, I had to have surgery. And so that was sort of like, welcome to IBD. I was hospitalized at this point over and over, right? Because of dehydration and pain and a lot of like the things in the beginning when you're trying to figure out, what are you doing here? Like, what's pain that's bad enough for the doctor? What medication is going to work? Like just kind of the new to it phase. I went in hard because I was like, cardiac ICU, month 1, I got this. And so after that, because I have MS, they were very hesitant to put me on the existing biologics at the time because they had a concern that it would cause an MS flare. So I went on 6-MP and Imuran for like a month, and we didn't see any improvement in that month. And I was getting sicker and sicker. I was on 60 milligrams of steroids a day for like 5 months. And so the doctors, I went to Cleveland Clinic because they're, who they are. And the doctor there was like, hey, you're probably going to need surgery. And I was like, haha, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that thing. I'm not doing that. And he was like, well, you can call us up and schedule your surgery, or you can get airlifted in when your colon explodes, your choice. So I was like, okay, that is a solid play. Okay. So after that, I went home and I scheduled surgery. And so I had a colectomy, and on the path to a J pouch, which when I was doing it was supposed to be a 3-step, and it turned into a 4-step because I had a lot of complications after one of my surgeries and had to redo one of them. And what should have taken 9 months took over 2 years in surgeries. And so long story longer, I have a J pouch now. It works very well. I'm very lucky in terms of how my J pouch functions and what I can do and what I can't do. And normally it rarely ever causes any issue. So after all of that, I felt like my experience was there was a big hole in a lot of things for patient. By things, I mean like emotional support, even just the community, especially for women, because I do think that it is a different experience for women because of the nature of the disease. So after I was kind of through the thick of it, I started a nonprofit called Girls with Guts and did that for 5 years, and they're still running. And I got into advocacy because of MS, but IBD really threw it hard forward because I couldn't ignore it anymore. I mean, in the beginning, I lied to everybody. I lied to my friends, my family. I mean, when my family found out I was in the hospital, it's like, you have to come visit me here. By the way, this is why I'm here. Surprise, surprise. And then I said, and now you have to lie to everybody. You can't tell anybody, because I was mortified. And that whole experience really made me feel I was really alone for a lot of it, and really just felt like I didn't want anybody else to have that level of shame over something you can't control. So that's kind of when I got into IBD advocacy, and it's been a very long, windy road since then.
Wow. I almost wish we were using the video so that people could have watched Robin's and my reactions to what you were just saying, because
just a reaction video.
too bad I didn't take some screenshots in there, because that's a lot that's happening.
That is a lot.
And I also didn't even think about the fact that if you're awake, you get to watch the camera get closer to your butt, and that.
Oh my gosh, that is a real thing. I had multiple scopes without any anesthesia, and yes, it's lovely. It's lovely to see that part of your butt. It really is.
It's a cruel joke. It's real bad. And the thing is, I'll take the inside views. I can because that's not I don't really identify with the inside. It's just your ass growing bigger and bigger.
It's just the approach. Okay, so
I don't identify with the inside. That's yeah, fuck you, inside of my colon. Bye-bye.
I'm going to start by fangirling just slightly and tell you that when Alicia told me that she talked to you about coming on the show, I almost died a little bit. I did a little chair dance. I was inside myself because I found you through Blood, Poop, and Tears
Oh my God.
Yes.
No way. Oh my God. I know you. You've commented on it. I knew that I knew your name. I just couldn't pinpoint it because names, right? But yes. Yeah, you did. Oh my God, thank you.
No, thank you. So you mentioned advocacy in your story and stuff, and I found you because of that blog. And honestly, you were the first one that I found. I had IBD for 10 years before I found you, and hadn't started sharing my story yet, hadn't started volunteering yet, hadn't started doing anything yet. And so when I just was a little baby in my infancy of advocacy, you're the first light that I found. And so I'm going to start crying. God dang it.
You're going to make me cry.
I'm very grateful for you. I'm just going to say that I'm very grateful for you, and you didn't even know it at the time. And could you dive into you shared so much in so much detail. It was so helpful for me. But how did you get to a space where you could be that open and honest about everything that was happening?
I was stupid. Mostly because, so at that time, to your point, and I always feel like people think I'm exaggerating, but at that point, specifically in IBD and even more specifically in J pouches, there were 4 websites that talked about this stuff. Now it's everywhere, and that's so amazing. But at that time, the bloggers that were blogging about this stuff, we all knew each other because there were only 5 of us. There just really wasn't a lot going on. But really, that Blood, Poop, Tears, that blog was really me in the beginning, just trying to cope. Because I said, I hid it from everybody. And in the very beginning of that blog, I think I was unintentionally anonymous. I don't think I purposefully removed my stuff, but I wasn't thinking about it. And in hindsight, that's why I say I was stupid, because I never attempted to hide my identity, which worked out very well for me. I will say that worked out well for me. Not so much for other people. And, disclose or not disclose, that's your choice. And it's a whole other thing. But I was not smart enough at 24 to even think about possible repercussions of sharing this information on the internet. I, at the time, was just there's a lot swirling in my head, and I don't know anybody with IBD. I have no idea what this looks like. I don't know how to live my life this way. And so I'm just going to word vomit on the internet, because I also can't talk to real people in my real life because I'm still hiding it from them. So I say a lot that I embarrassed myself on the internet for the greater good, because I did. It was mostly because there was so much shit happening, and I just didn't know. There was not community then the way that there is now. And it wasn't that long ago. And I feel like in this day and age of internet, that sounds like bullshit. It sounds made up, but it wasn't. There just wasn't enough out there. You didn't have stories of people thriving. What you had was forums full of people coming and lamenting and complaining, and everything just sounded awful. There were no positive stories. And I didn't set out to share a positive story, because in the beginning I didn't have one. It was pretty awful. And it continued to get awful for years. But then like people commented and people related, and I could not believe people were reading about my butt on purpose. Like I could not believe that. But there's something about that's the moment it feels like there's a reason, there's purpose when someone says, wow, that was really helpful, or I shared your article with my friend, spouse, whoever, and it helped them understand something. Those moments are really powerful, especially when you're grasping at straws for any kind of meaning or purpose because everything sucks. So I never thought I would see those people in real life. I think that's why I was able to share.
Bye!
I never thought I did. I never thought that I would be like in a room or face to face with anybody who read some of that shit. And then as it turns out, the last 10 years has me basically been being face to face with people who read that shit through advocacy efforts. So when I needed surgery is when I started telling people like in my real life about what was happening because I couldn't hide it anymore. But I had already been talking about it on my blog for a really long time before that. And I had an MS blog too at the time. Like when I was first diagnosed, I think this is just how I cope. I just like word vomit on the internet and then like somebody reads it and I'm like, oh, well, that's uncomfortable a little bit, but here we are anyway. So.
And now you're a famous patient advocate.
Yeah. What everybody strives to be known for is their butt disease on the internet for sure.
Please. I mean, when I told my best friend that we were starting this podcast, she said, so you're starting a podcast about your butt. And I was like, well, not just my butt, other people's butts too.
You betcha.
So here we are. So, but sharing your story, having people read uncomfortable stories. So I'm going to date myself again, and please do not issue a restraining order on me. I also remember when you guys went to Chicago for the first time and had your first like girl. Okay. I really was a fan. And you had your first Girls with Guts like meetings before you started the nonprofit. So how did you just oversharing on the internet get you to the point where you were really making a difference in advocacy and then starting your own nonprofit? Like that's like a huge, you don't just, overshare on the internet and bang, start a nonprofit. Like there's steps in between there.
Also, this is 100% my favorite interview so far. So thank you. So that meetup in Chicago was basically, I was saying there were like 5 bloggers at the time. That was us. And so because we all knew each other, we were like, let's just meet up. Like, let's just do that. And because, that was after it was sort of safe to meet people on the internet, but it was still kind of a little sketch. But I was like, they feel like nice people, right? So we all came in from various different places. And on the way there, I remember thinking in the car, I wanted to start like a conference is what I wanted to do. Because I was like, this is cool. Like I have these friends and we talk about this and it's not weird or gross or whatever. And we did have some people on the internet saying like, are you guys doing this again? Like, this is cool. I want to come. And so I was like, okay, we're going to do a conference. That's what we're doing. And then after that weekend, I was like, conference sounds really lame and boring. I don't want to do a conference. Like I officially talked myself out of conferencing. But that weekend we called it the Girls with Guts weekend. And after that, I kind of started like noodling. So I was a counselor at Camp Oasis for about 5 years. And that feeling of home and acceptedness at camp, it's a magical place. It's more magical than Disney. It totally changed my life. And I started going there as a grown-up, as a counselor. So I can only imagine kind of what kids experience there. And I realized like I wanted that. I wanted that for everybody, like just like a family feeling, a warmth, a comfort, a like, let's step out of our activities. And I knew that the camp we did it in Michigan could easily accommodate us because that's where Camp Oasis went. And so that's kind of where it started. We started Girls with Guts as like a Facebook page for support. Like, remember when people used to post questions on Facebook pages publicly? That was a weird time in the internet.
Right? The Stone Ages.
Yeah. So we had that going for a while. And then it was like, we wanted to do more. We wanted to do this event. And we knew that like we needed to be an entity of some kind to do that because of liability and money and all that stuff. So decided to be a nonprofit because I thought that that's what made the most sense at the time. And it was a year after we incorporated like on a state level that we decided to do the first retreat. And so we did it here in Michigan at the same camp that I did Camp Oasis at, because also at that time I knew the counselors, I knew the staff there. It was really easy to plan a brand new event that didn't exist when you had that kind of confidence in the location. I was only figuring out the people, not like the place. So we did it there. I think there were like 30 or 32 women that showed up that first year, which I still can't believe happened, because it was like, we were nobody. And we were like, hey, internet, you want to spend some money and come fly in and hang out with us for a weekend? We don't know what we're doing. Can't promise you it's going to be fun, but like maybe you might meet someone and it could be cool, but no guarantees, basically. And people came, they showed up. I like still like, who does, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't show up to that, but they did. And the result was a lot of good positivity, and people were happy, and that is when everybody started calling themselves like sisters. It was a sisterhood. And so we continued on and grew the event and went all around the nation after that, because we heard resounding that travel costs were expensive and traveling long distances was really hard. So we tried to move it around so that way, if you're on the West Coast, you don't always have to come to Michigan, and vice versa. And actually our 5-year celebration was in Chicago, sort of as a bringing it home to that initial weekend.
I love that so much. I know somebody who went to one of your retreats, and it changed her life. So
that's what I loved the most about it. I left in 2017 for a lot of reasons, but those moments of like, I leave a different person, or I leave and I have all these friends that I didn't have before, and I knew no one, I was alone, but now look at like, those were the moments where I was like, that's exactly what I wanted. I didn't have that. I didn't know anybody else who had that when I was first diagnosed. And that's what the kids had. And that's what I really wanted for grown-ups. I wanted grown-up sleepaway camp, basically.
I love that. I think a lot of the camp counselors who live with IBD probably also feel the same way. I think that's a really common feeling. So you mentioned wanting specifically to put together kind of a space for women, and that women have perhaps a different disease experience. Tell me a little bit more about your thoughts on that. I know one of the things you were interested in talking about is women's issues and inflammatory bowel disease. Tell me why that's important.
So when I was first entering into my surgery sequence at Cleveland Clinic, at the time, through the magic of the internet, I met 2 people who were starting their sequences within like a month of me. They both were guys, and the 3 of us would talk a lot at the time, because J-pouch information was like, long-term J-pouch information was also non-existent at that time. And they were having a 2-step and a 3. It was sort of like, we all were just like, what the fuck does all of this mean? So we were really kind of supporting each other through that. And what I learned there with those 2 guys is, what I learned as a youth is like, boys can burp and fart and talk about how stinky their poop is. And it's like, ha ha ha, that's hilarious. And girls are like, I have a stomach ache. And we're like, don't talk about that. So it's just like the drastic, like what you're allowed to do, air quotes allowed, and that's why I had so much shame and hid it so much. And so I knew from the beginning, even though like the disease course might be the same, the feeling is a little bit different. Even if men share shame and guilt and embarrassment, it's different just from the nature of how we as a society approach these issues for men and women. And people would always tell me like, when are you going to start a Guys with Guts? And I was like, first of all, bro, not a guy. Don't know the guy's experience. Cannot do that. I digress. So I'm watching these 2 guys kind of go through their thing, and I'm learning about their experience. And there were things I learned that I didn't know. Like, some of them have issues with erectile dysfunction after surgery, and like all kinds of things that like, why would I know that? I didn't know that. And so what I learned though was like, there's some different stuff going on through my surgery sequence. And one of my surgeries, I had the NuvaRing as my form of birth control. And I woke up from surgery, and a day later was hemorrhaging. And I thought something real bad was going on inside of me because I just had major surgery. Well, it turns out my male surgeon removed my NuvaRing, didn't tell me, didn't put it back in. And so I started my period. And that was one of those like real, like glaring moments where it was like, oh, there's a difference here in how men and women are going to approach this, because he never talked to me about it. Like, even after, when I discovered I wasn't hemorrhaging from surgery, and I had open surgeries, I didn't have laparoscopic surgery. So I had major open surgeries, was not planning on a period in the hospital after that. And there was a bunch of things I saw. I had male surgeons for all of my surgeries, and certain things like my uterus got tilted when everything was swollen. And so a couple months after surgery, I tried to use a tampon and it wouldn't couldn't go in. I was like hitting walls. And I was like, I mean, I've done this a few times. That's weird. That doesn't normally happen. And so I called my PCP, my gynecologist, and she was like, oh, it's because everything is swollen. It's tilted. It'll go back once everything calms down. And I was like, no one told me this. No one told me any of this. All that they told me was, oh, you could have issues with fertility. And I didn't want to have kids. I still don't want to have kids. Didn't matter to me. And that was all they wanted to talk about every visit. Well, you might have impacted fertility. And I was like, yeah, bro, I don't care. Can we move on? And he was like, okay, but just so you know, like, I got it. But all the stuff that actually impacted my life, no one ever said one time, not once.
The NuvaRing thing is absolutely wild to me too, because what if, I mean, you're going to go have sex and then have a baby that you didn't expect to be having because you didn't know your NuvaRing was in there? Like, that seems like a big deal, man.
Yeah. And it was like, I just felt the carelessness of that choice, and if you had told me, like, I never thought that it would impact the surgery, right? Something in different spots. But if you had said, it's on my chart, it's there, I would have taken it out. I would have stored it so that it could be reinserted after the surgery, or I would have made plans to get a different one, but like no communication, nothing whatsoever. And like, I went to Cleveland for the purpose of their GI department because they have the head surgeon at the time had done a lot of J pouches, like a lot. And that's what I wanted. But I had a major issue with his bedside and ended up leaving for my last surgery. I had somebody else do it because I really did not appreciate how that was going.
I had to do that too. I ended up changing surgeons in between my J-pouch surgery because of that. I'm just going to get on a soapbox for 1 second, Alicia, since we're talking about women's issues. My problem with doctors and women's issues is they always push the fertility issues, and I am knocking on the door of 50. I am not having a baby. I am not trying to have a baby. My children are 25 and 23 years old, and Crohn's and colitis and IBD are lifelong diseases. So why are we not doing research or treating women outside of fertility issues? Like, we all know that hormones wreak havoc on a lot of our bodies and cause flares or symptoms, but nobody's talking about that. I've asked a couple of doctors about that, even ones that specialize in IBD and women's issues. I'm like, not everybody is 25 to 35 and looking to have children. Even people who are 25 and 35 are not all of them are looking to have children. There are other issues that women face besides fertility. Okay, I will step down off of my soapbox now. Sorry.
But no, to your point, like, what would I have liked to learn? Oh, you're probably going to need some PT after these surgeries. Your core, which we have cleaned through 4 times, is a mess now. You're going to have long-term back problems. You're going to have all these problems unless you address this. And instead, no one said it, which in hindsight, like, yeah, no shit. Obviously, there's going to be problems, but nobody told me this, so I didn't think about it. And then years and years later, I have crazy back problems and I'm in PT all the time. I have to see a chiropractor. I have all these things because no one told me your core is going to be permanently screwed up after this. I would have much rather heard that than you won't be able to have, or you're going to have a heart. They didn't say you won't be able to have babies. That was a misstep, but it might be harder to have babies. And I was like, I don't give a shit about babies. I got dogs. What I want is to be able to stand up without my back hurting. That would be great.
Yeah, it definitely seems like there should be a holistic discussion that happens around like, hey, so this is what's going to happen. Here's things that maybe you could do beforehand, like take your NuvaRing out and have your period so that you don't have it in the hospital and freak out about hemorrhaging. And also, by the way, here's things you should do afterwards, like, pelvic floor PT. The other thing is just the consent behind having him go into your vagina and remove something without you consenting to it because you were unconscious. Like, that's not okay. Like it just, to me, I'm like, oh, that's messed up, man. Okay. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there might be some kind of very obvious, clear medical reason that it was removed during surgery that I'm just not aware of because I'm not a surgeon, but it still feels like that's a thing. You tell the patient, just let me know. And I don't know. I just really can't kick the feeling that because he was a guy, he just did not think twice about it. It just was like, this is in my way. We're going to get rid of it.
I mean, it probably has to do with blood clotting and stuff like that. Because of, some of these birth controls can cause issues with blood clots. But like, again, that was on your chart. It's something that could have been communicated with you. It should have been something they caught before you're lying on the table. And they're like, oh, we'll just pull this out real fast.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Oh my God. Anyway, sorry, I'm upset for you right now. So Girls with Guts evolved. After you were starting to do these get-togethers with folks, how did this catalyze this group of people to get involved? In what ways did they get involved afterwards?
So what I heard from people, one, people were just more willing to talk about their stories. I think afterwards, you meet other people, it validates your experience, you realize you're not the outlier. It becomes a lot easier to say like, oh, me too, and then go home and try to educate your families a little bit more. I heard that a lot where people would say I left and I felt like I had some language to discuss better with my partner, my parents, whoever they needed to talk to, or people could talk to their kids better because we really tried to put together workshops and sessions that were helpful, stuff that would be useful, as opposed to like, here's this, I don't know, I can't think of a good example, but like, here's something that nobody gives a shit about that you're paying to be at. We had GI psychologists come in. We had women's pelvic floor therapists come in. Like, we wanted things that people have interests about. Stress management, yoga, all the jazz, because there still is a hole in this sort of like the whole body of care. And so I think it empowered people to not feel as ashamed about their disease, to be able to talk about it more. And I think it even helped people who maybe were facing surgery. And if you don't know anybody, right, like having surgery is a really scary prospect. And so if you meet people who have ostomies or you meet people who have J pouches and they're having good lives, it becomes a lot easier to approach that for yourself. And so I think just all the things that happen out of a good community is what was happening at the time.
So now you're an entrepreneur, you have your own business. So how did you transition or translate that experience into starting your own business?
So that's a funny story. What I'm about to say sounds very cocky, but there's no cock in it. Everything that happened with Girls with Guts came very easily. My instincts were like on almost every time. There were a lot of people who wanted to support us. When we opened up that first retreat, the first year, I think, like I said, I think there were 32 people. The second year it doubled. It was just like people were into it. It was not hard. I mean, in the beginning, we sold handmade bracelets to make money. And then by the time I left, we had major pharma partners, right? So it was like, it just worked. What I thought we should do and we did just worked. And then I started a business and none of that tracked. Nothing that I was like, this is what we need to do worked. It was like obviously a very totally different market, like IBD and web design. But I felt very much like maybe my instincts as an entrepreneur are actual shit because it felt really hard in the beginning. And as it turns out, what I needed was community of women entrepreneurs to help me figure my shit out. And then I found that and I did it and we're doing good now. But there's been more than one time in my life that I have been lost or struggling, found a community in that area and worked it all out. And so I'm a huge proponent of communities because for me personally, I would have failed at a lot of things had I not had various communities. But in terms of businessing, the businesses were so different and the markets were so different. There was very little overlap. And in the beginning, there was a lot of imposter syndrome because I was like, I am garbage at this. Like, I thought I was good. Now I'm not good. And it just took time.
Okay. If you're an entrepreneur, you have your own business, what do you do for health insurance? Do you have to do like open marketplace plans?
So when I was working in corporate America before I quit to work full time for Girls with Guts. And the only reason that I was able to do that was because of the ACA at the time. And I think that opened up a lot of doors for a lot of people that wouldn't have had that otherwise. Like I never would have been able to do that prior to ACA. So that's what I did then. This time around, I solved that problem. I went and got married and was like, we don't have to worry about this anymore. And very candidly, that was the number one reason we got married at the time was for health insurance. We like each other. I mean, we love each other. He's great. Everything's wonderful. Super glad we did it. But at the time, it was because I wanted to quit my job. And I knew that I couldn't quit my job unless I had health insurance. Very romantic.
No, my husband's first company when we were not married, like I could still get health insurance because I was not working at the time as his domestic partner. So they were forward thinking enough in the early 2000s that they knew that people would have domestic partners. And I was still able to get health insurance. But yeah, that is a big bonus.
People have gotten married for worse reasons.
Right. And like I said, we do actually love each other. So it actually works out, But that's something I think about all the time. because where I'm at in life right now, when I quit my last job, I had a life of privilege that I have not had access to prior to that. Even when I quit to work for Girls with Guts, right? That was all on me. It was like, you got to find the money, everything is on you. And this time I have a partner, which made it a very different experience and candidly really opened my eyes up to, I don't keep want to say privilege, but how different the experience is if you have a spouse who can still bring in a paycheck, who can provide health insurance through their job. Some of these things that if I didn't have Adam and we weren't where we were then, I wouldn't have this business 100%. There's no way I could have done it on my own because like any new business, I didn't make any money in the beginning. There was no money. And so if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't even have tried because I would have lost my health insurance and I would have been broke. So when I was single, the only way I was able to do that was because of the ACA. Now I can do it because of him. I probably could still use the ACA again this time, but again, in the beginning, I didn't have any money and ACA plans aren't cheap. So it's not a perfect system. And we could talk about this for a real long time. I got a lot of opinions on this one, but it's the people who need it the most are the ones who struggle to find it in terms of health insurance. And I think that's bullshit.
We also have a lot of opinions about this and oftentimes have to curb the conversation because we will go down a rabbit hole. Lickety split.
My husband just switched jobs at the beginning of last year and he works for a startup now. And we have insurance, which I actually was like, at least we get insurance, but I've never had a high deductible plan before on purpose, obviously. And now we do. And it's like the fucking worst. It's terrible because I hit it every year.
Do you mind if we backtrack to multiple sclerosis?
No.
So what is interesting is you mentioned that your provider was like, how do we figure this out? We're going to put you on this so we don't end up with a flare for that. How do you manage your care? How do you manage your care team? How do they decide on your treatment? What does that look like?
So I'll be honest, I don't think I've ever really had a solid care team in that they work together. It's more or less me transporting information between the two places. I also think, candidly, I've had way too much say in what I think my medication should be over the years. I am not qualified to make those choices, but I feel like I do. So that is what it is. But in the beginning, the post UC diagnosis was the first time that there was actually this real conversation about like that. I think that's when the how do we manage both of them at the same time was the most prominent conversation it's ever been. And at the time, so there's a drug called Tysabri, which is approved for MS. And then later on, it became approved for Crohn's, I think, and maybe UC, I'm not entirely sure. But there was some off-label stuff going on. And the other thing about Tysabri is it causes PML, which is a brain condition, and people die. So it's scary.
It can cause it. It doesn't.
Yes.
I'm going to make sure we say that because the folks on Tysabri won't scare the shit out of them.
Yes. No, it can cause it. There are lots of other factors. You have to be JC virus positive. Like there's a lot of other stuff. So at the time though, my GI, I was getting sicker and sicker and the IBD drugs weren't working. And so I'm thinking maybe I get a twofer, right? I take Tysabri, I get an MS drug that maybe helps my UC, and like maybe I'm the weird winner who wins from this like weird kind of situation. And I will never forget this. That man said to me, "Why would we give you a drug that can kill you when you can have surgery that can cure you?"
Coming off mute for that one. Oh my gosh.
Right. And luckily at that time, I knew that was bullshit, right? I didn't believe him. But if I wasn't an advocate in the MS space at that time, I would have been like, whoa, he's right. This drug can kill me. I shouldn't take it. But it was like the double whammy of that statement, that drug can kill you and surgery can cure you. And I didn't see him for very long after that. But since then, because I don't take anything for IBD anymore after surgery, it's been a lot easier to manage, right? It's mostly like I take medication for MS. I don't really take anything for IBD. But what has happened is I've had to, I have tried various MS medications over the years. And almost always one of the major side effects in the beginning of starting one of those medication is, quote, GI issues. So basically I'm like, okay, so I'm going to be shitting way more than the average person is. And I'm probably going to be dehydrated and run down. And so we take precautions in that way, where it's like, if I can predict maybe what's going to go on, we can try to nip it in the bud. But the care teams don't really talk to each other. And I don't blame them at this point because not a lot to talk about anymore. J-Pouch land has been pretty good for me. And MS has also been very good to me. I've been very fortunate in that space where they're both kind of getting along right now for a while. I did, when I was having my surgeries, I had an MS relapse in the middle of my surgery sequence because stress on the body can cause relapses. And so that was pretty awful. I lost my vision for a while I was waiting for my next round of surgery. But at that time I went to the neurologist, I got the steroids, I told the GI, it was just sort of like, again, me ushering information between the two. There's never really been a team effort, which would be nice and great, but also that's not the world that I live in.
So let me just get this straight. You lost your vision while also having to deal with an ostomy?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
no.
It's just I have what's called optic neuritis a lot. Well, not a lot, but my most common MS flare is optic neuritis, where you can get blindness or blurry vision or double vision in one eye or both eyes. I typically get it in my right eye, and how I get it, it's like a black circle. So you can't see anything out of that one eye. So yeah, it's challenging and awful and it sucks. But the good news is most of the time it comes back. It just takes time.
Yeah, a lot of folks figure out they have MS or end up going to a doctor because of having vision issues. And so that's why a lot of people do end up figuring out their diagnosis, because there's vision changes for many folks. That's okay. Wow, that's a lot. But you're right. It is hard because you would think that they would at least want to talk to each other, because there are ramifications of what they're doing for your MS and the rest of you. So let's go back to advocacy for a little bit, because I do love it, as does Robin. So talk to us about doing political advocacy work. How did you get involved in that? What do you love about it? What do you hate about it?
So I will be transparent in that I've done not as much political advocacy work that I would like to. I was invited by the CCF, formerly CCFA, to do IBD Day on the Hill one year. And that was sort of the first taste of impacting legislation, or even just talking about legislation, and how at that time we were talking about step therapy, which I have a real beef with. So I was happy to be there. But it also very candidly showed me how bullshit that whole process is. Because, you go and you do all these meetings with all these like senators who don't show up, and then you talk to their aides and they're like, yeah, cool, great story. We'll be sure to send this along. And so it's like, that's as good as you can do. And it feels like you're doing stuff, but it still is like, I don't feel like we're doing things. And so I know there are other ways. There are ways you can testify and, like lots of things. I haven't done that stuff, but I felt like the political stuff is really important. And there are some really great advocates who do this stuff. Like they do the political stuff and they do it well. And I was like, it's not really my lane. Like I liked doing it. It felt very important being there, but I'm fairly jaded by our government. So I think I just was like, I don't think this is my lane.
I will say it depends on what staffer you get too. When you're having meetings with legislators and they don't show up and it's their staffers there. I've had some really good meetings with staffers and gotten follow-up and seen change directly from the meetings. But I have also had those meetings that you're talking about with the staffer who's like finger gunning you, like
thanks for telling your story. Cool, get out now.
Oh, thanks, little lady. I'll be sure to send this message on. Feel free to email me to follow up. Wink, wink. Like I've had those too, but I have had some of the meetings where you actually see that sharing your story has made change. So I think it just depends on the staffer that you get.
Yeah. I mean, I was also partnered with a doctor in the GI space who is a very well-known doctor. And so I think candidly, my voice got overshadowed in a lot of those meetings by him. But like, it didn't matter as long as that was, you know what I'm saying? But like, I didn't love it. What I do love, on the other hand, though, that I have kind of discovered is I like working with healthcare companies and even pharma on umbrella issues. And what I mean by that is like stuff that helps the community as a whole. And I have seen a lot of that kind of work. Like you're saying, I've seen real change come out of it. I partnered with a pharma company for a couple years on an ad board for them. And through our work, they would come back to us and say, this is what we changed because of the work you guys did. This is literally the document that you've changed. And that kind of work, I feel like it feeds my soul. There's a lot of bureaucracy, but I don't have to deal with it in pharma stuff. But it's reshaped the way that I think about pharma, because I used to think of it as this like greedy old man, like clasping his hands over all of his money, like looking over everything. And sure, that's still there. It's not a perfect system, but what I have learned is that there are some really amazing people who work in those spaces who do believe in their mission, who do want things to get better. And those people I have worked with a lot, and they've kind of helped me rewrite that narrative about pharma, because they're wonderful people and they do listen to us and they do take what we say to heart, and you see real change for real people because of that. And that stuff, I'm into that stuff.
I agree. And I think as much as we rail against health insurance companies, which we do, I think unless you're willing to sit down at the table with them, unless you're willing to get involved, you're not going to see change. It really does take people like you getting involved in these advisory boards and being willing to share your story and talk about why this is affecting you the way it is in order to see change. Because there are people that work in these companies that do want change. I agree with you 100%. So I'm glad you're doing that, because that is a really impactful way of creating change. And I see pharmaceutical companies being better about including patients in all parts of the drug development from the beginning of like, is this even something that you would ever want to do because it's a weird way of delivering or something like that. And also trying to ensure that patients of color are being represented within the clinical trials and within the process. So I see them trying. And so that's encouraging.
And I think that they are trying. And don't get me wrong, sure, there's still a lot of performative action. Sometimes even having ad boards are purely performative. But the way I have to look at it, otherwise it will feel like you're, spinning circles, is when I first started, we were not invited to the table at all. And even after we started getting invited to the table, we were not paid. So it was like, there's been this slow trajectory. And this makes me feel really old, because I'm like, back in my day, they didn't even talk to us. But the reality is I've seen this change since I started. It was really like, patients, who's patients? We don't care about patients. Like, they're just people. They don't know anything. And then it was like, well, we can talk to them. And now it's like, oh, there's some value there. We can pay them, or maybe we should pay them. And there's a slow progress. And even though it doesn't feel like we're equal partners, it doesn't feel like we are necessarily treated the same as some of their medical advisors, it's closer than it was 10 years ago. And I have to believe that there has to be progress, even if it's slow. Pharma stuff is slow. Legislative stuff is slow. So I figure they're going to talk to someone, and I'd like it to be me, even if it's not in the perfect scenario and the perfect outcomes. This is as good as it is right now. So this is what I'm willing to do. And there's been a lot of really great experiences because of that. There's also been a lot of shit experiences because of that. In my last job, I worked with pharma, not as a patient, but as helping them connect with patients. And they said some shitty things on those calls. You know what I mean? Like, there was people like, oh, they don't look sick enough. I mean, just absurd things. So like, it's not perfect, but it's like the whole world. There are some garbage people, and then there are some great people, and you just try to align yourself with the good ones.
Well, and hopefully you're using that as like a teaching moment too, of being like, that's not appropriate. Wow.
Yeah.
Sheesh.
Yeah.
So I am curious, how are you being approached to participate in some of these things? And then how are you selecting which ones you do feel like are going to be the ones you want to give your time to?
Right now, I have this weird status of patient advocacy where I call myself like I wrote this article a long time ago about like the patient advocacy circle of life, and that there's like different levels of where you are. And I'm in the like OG advocate level, mostly because when I started, it was, blogs. That's all there was. There wasn't social media, there were blogs. And so my social channels are still kind of shit because I didn't put the effort into them because I was blogging. And now, there are brand new Instagrammers with 30,000 followers. And I'm like, that looks hard. I don't want to do that. So I have this like track record of establishing myself in this space before social media was around. And there are a lot of us like that who we sort of just like, you've been here, we trust you kind of a vibe. And so, because like, I don't blog anymore. I don't write for any health sites really anymore. Like, I've kind of tried to work on bigger projects versus like the smaller individual ones. And because of that, I don't feel like my name is out there in the way that maybe it was 10 years ago, but people keep calling and LOL calling. I'm a millennial. People email me. People keep writing to me, and a lot of it is referral. Like, there's a group of advocates who know each other, who consistently refer each other out for good projects. Like last week, I actually got approached from this company in England because of somebody that I met in all of my advocacy journals had told them about the work that I've done. And I try to look at it from the perspective of, I mean, candidly, first and foremost, does it pay? Because if it doesn't, I don't have time for it. And also like a little bit of fuck you too if it doesn't pay. Like, it should pay. And then honestly, how much does it pay? And who is the client or the sponsor, right? Like, who am I actually doing the work with? And there are some things that I'm not for. I don't have a like blanket rule, like I don't work with pharma, obviously, or I don't work with whatever, but I like stuff that feels like it's going to enact a real change. So 6 years ago, I used to do smaller stuff, right? Like round tables or, come and give us your insights for an hour kind of stuff. And that stuff was great because it was paying and it didn't take a lot of time and you felt like your voice was being heard. But it also feels a little bit like you have those conversations and then nothing happens, or you don't know if anything happened. It's just like you talk into like an echo chamber with your other patients and then who knows. So I like projects now where either there's a guarantee of you are working with people in the department who are not just patients, right? You're working with our scientists, you're working with our research people, you're working with our clinical trials department, like whatever. Or this is going to directly impact how a patient interacts with their disease, their doctor, their journey. And I try to pick things like that, but sometimes things just look fun. So, so you just do the fun stuff too. I mean, I've tried to set criteria on this and be like, it's got to pay this and it's got to look like this and and it just doesn't work. Like I got approached a couple years ago to do an ad board and they were like, we're going to pay $50 an hour. And I was like, that's bullshit. That's not enough. This is stupid. And I did it anyway. And it's been like one of the best ones I've ever done. I've had a partnership for years now with them. So it was like, you bend the rules for if it feels good.
And then you have us with 372 followers on Instagram. We are killing the influencer game right now.
I think you have more than I do.
Just as long as they're listening to the podcast. I don't care if they're following us on Instagram, as long as they're listening to the podcast.
Yeah, you got to set criteria, but then at the same token, there could be some that you just go, you know what, the amount of effort that they're putting into what I think could change the patient journey makes the $50 an hour make more sense.
Yeah. Well, and like what's happening in the project, like that one particularly, we were working with patients around the globe on that project. And I was like, that's cool. And now I know patients literally everywhere, specifically in IBD and other condition areas, which was so incredibly valuable, particularly in 2020, because I was like, what's your country doing? What does it look like for care for you? And to have that perspective on how it's so different everywhere around the world, like that was worth the $50 deal, So sometimes it's not just what it's happening now, but it's kind of what it can spiral into or the next project that comes along. I don't know. There are people who do this for a living. Like this is their job. And that's not me. I still just do it because I like doing it. But I did a lot of free work in the early days. I did there was no paid work. So all of it was free work. And so now that's basically my criteria is that it's paid a fair wage because I'm also getting old. I don't got time for everything anymore. So
we don't have any sympathy for you because we're older than you. Just gonna put that out there. But yes,
that's right.
But it does make sense. I agree with you. And you're busier. You have your own business to run. So any time that you're spending doing something for free is time you're not spending on your own business, which actually brings in money. So totally understandable.
We always ask on our questionnaire about the fun facts. And I am not even going to try to pronounce what you put in. Look, I am from Louisiana, New Orleans, basically, and we cannot pronounce anything. So please tell me about the fun fact that you put on your questionnaire. What in the world are we talking about here?
So I put down that I study the Elder Futhark runes, which is, I think it's Norwegian, so I wouldn't be surprised. And I only know how to pronounce it because I've watched YouTube videos. So the runes, there are lots of kinds of runes. They're like a very, very early alphabet. And there are two that people study often. There's the elder and then the younger. They were used originally, I feel like I'm like, someone's going to come for me for not being right about this. No one listening to this is an authority on the runes, so I can just say whatever I want.
You literally can. You could make the entire thing up.
So anyway, they were back we're talking like year 200, like really long time ago. They were used as like an early form of divination, like think tarot cards. But then the younger Futhark actually turned into an actual usable alphabet. And so there are things called rune stones where ancient peoples wrote out things, stories, inscriptions, whatever in runes. So it's both an alphabet, both also used for divination. And I use them for honing intuition, basically. So there's a series of symbols on stuff You know, you can be on wood, antlers, rocks, like whatever you want to use them for. And then you can draw them and read them, or you can cast them and like throw them everywhere. So each one has a name. Each one has like 47,000 meanings, which is why you have to study them. And I really like them. I went down this like weird rabbit hole last year of like my personal ancestry and history and interests. And I'm a big historical fiction nerd. So I was doing this painting that it doesn't matter. I started studying them and now I have all the books, and I roped my sister into it. And now we have a weird study group of grown ass people who have like a research project, and we're like using note cards and shit. Like it's weird. But yeah, that's thems. And here's a really, for your purposes, not listeners, but like here's a really cheap set, but it's basically just like, can you see that?
Yes.
So I have a set like where they're on antlers, they're on wood. This is like a gross, cheap, you know, stupid particle board. But those are the symbols. And so they all have names and meanings. And then you just read them like a tarot card, kind of, but different.
This makes me love you more. I mean, seriously, like I think I just fell in love with you.
Yeah, I appreciate
Seriously.
the dedication that is going along with this. Like,
Yes.
there's a lot about this that I truly love, and I can't wait for you to like read my runes.
Yes. Is that a thing? Because I want my runes read also.
Yeah, like we're gonna hang up and do that, I think is what's gonna happen.
It is a thing. And for the record, there are people who do this who are like actually talented at it.
I mean, come on.
It also sounds dirty too. I think that might be why I like it. I mean,
So I think if you're a normal person who isn't a chronic overthinker and researcher like me, you go, this is what it is. It's got a name, it's got a meaning, and then you're like, done. But me, so I have a library science degree, which means like grade level A nerd already. And
I did
I'm
not
like,
know that, and now we love you even more.
so I'm like, you can't just learn the meanings. You have to feel the meanings, your own meanings. And so then you have to like assess them based on what you think they say. So my sister and I are literally simultaneously reading 6 books together. We meet to talk about our notes. Then we're creating our own manual at the end of it.
this is the best fun fact that we have ever had on this show. And I can't wait to read your manual about this.
I am so excited. Yes. I love it. I think this is so great. Well, Jackie, what fun to have you on the show. Seriously, we're going to continue this conversation and get some rune readings after this. But unfortunately, we do have to ask you our last question already, which is, if you had one piece of advice for the IBD community, what would it be?
This tip literally changes every time someone asks me, because like there's no one. For me, it always feels like the most obvious tip now, but it's me projecting that you don't have to do it alone. Like I did it alone. I recovered from surgery alone. I went grocery shopping after open surgery like an idiot, right? Like you don't have to do this stuff alone. The community now is so big. It's so vast. There are so many voices. It's not like how it was in the beginning, that if you can learn to get over any maybe shame or guilt that you feel, which you shouldn't feel it, but if you do feel it, there is a whole community out there full of people who want to learn from you and support you and share your experience with you, which I feel like could have been a very different outcome for me had I had that when I started. This is a really isolating disease. There's a lot of embarrassment and shame that comes along with it, and it just doesn't have to be that way anymore.
I love that. You don't have to do it alone.
Jackie, we adore you. Like
Yes.
this was so much fun. Robin had her fangirl moment.
I did.
love this. It was
My
the
life
best
was
thing
made.
ever. So thank you so much for joining us, Jackie. Thank you also everyone else for listening and for joining us on Bowel Moments, and cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. Hi, this is Jackie, and if you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, subscribe, and share with a friend, and follow them on Instagram, please. Like just do it.